Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumburger channel. Strange show where we take a little dive into a different album each and every week, right? So in today's episode, we're traversing into another genre that we actually haven't discussed on this show before. We're going to discuss, kind of an odd album, kind of a nice one, but also kind of a dumb one as well, I would say. Essentially, this album is just new age music. New age music through and through. It offers very exquisite flute performances, to be fair, set against this backdrop of the very seas themselves. Very strange, but it's also kind of nice, but it's also kind of funny in places as well. It's a difficult one for me to take seriously, hence why I thought it'd be funny to talk about on the show. So let's just crack on with it. Today, I present Reverence by Terry Oldfield. So of course, let's ask ourselves, who is Terry Oldfield? Well, Terence Raymond Oldfield is an English New Age composer and flutist, currently based in Australia, who's released a lot of albums for the record label New World Company. Also, it should be mentioned, Terry is of course siblings to both Sally Oldfield and the more well-known Oldfield, Mike Oldfield. Of course, famous composer of Tubular Bells and other such albums as well, don't get me wrong. In any case, we're talking about Terry Oldfield, though, who across his career, has released a large number of albums, all of new age music, mostly through the New World Company record label, demonstrating his precise playing of the flute, it seems, which creates very serene atmospheres to inhabit, I would say. And so, what is Reverence? Well, Reverence is one of many albums from Oldfield, of course, released in 1987 by, as mentioned, New World Company. Comprised of 2 tracks, we're offered, gentle serenity in the form of flute music, whale song, and, various backing instrumentals, just to help build up that sonic palette. And I have to say, adorned with a wonderful album cover design by one Michael Pozen, who, from my understanding, has designed a bunch of album covers for the New World Company catalogue of albums, including Keeper of Dreams by Philip Chapman. And so, yeah, this album does exactly what it says on the tin, an offering of new age music to soothe the soul, one would imagine. So let's dive into it, shall we? So, Reverence opens up with the 22-minute track of Wings of the Morning. And so I'll be honest, when it comes to this album, I essentially just thought it'd be funny to review. But what I didn't expect is how hard it would be to actually articulate and write my thoughts about this one. So, to try to discuss what the song's like, it essentially starts off, with the intermittent sounds of seagulls, I think, or other seabirds, and the gentle lapping of the very waves themselves, and of course, Oldfield's, precision playing of the flute. And apparently, embedded amongst, the very layers themselves are actually the sounds of whales, making droning vocalizations that accompany the musical palette, And all in all, it combines together in a rather effortless way, creating this drift across the sea itself as the whales just break the water and come up for air. And to be fair, there's a lot of droning ambient layers, intertwining themselves in amongst the scene, but it's, without a doubt, the flute that is the core focal point of this very album experience, It all just results, though, an incredibly gentle and serene album experience that perfectly envisions that cassette album cover here. A sort of suggesting to the wonder and the majesty of whales themselves, perhaps. And perhaps, being a celebration of the very creatures themselves, maybe. It's very lovely, very calm, and it is essentially very much like the kind of thing you'd expect to hear in some relaxing spa hotel, most likely, where the aim of the music is to just occupy the background with these gentle musical layers. I should say though, beyond that, I don't know what else to say about this song. It's essentially just 20 minutes of serene droning new age flute music, but nothing else beyond that. And that's not to say it's bad though. Don't get me wrong, don't make it wrong. As much as this album baffles me, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's a bit odd. And to be fair, it's interesting that the music does certainly achieve what it sets out to do, which is simply just create a gentle soundscape of droning layers, one that does feel like floating amongst the waves themselves as you fall back, relax, and enjoy the pleasant vibes being pushed out by it all. It's very much the kind of thing that just perfectly accompanies that sort of spa vibe, if that makes sense. I should say, I do think when it comes to new age music though, it is a little bit funny on some levels, hence why I wanted to talk about it on the show, because I want to try and understand what it is I find funny about it, if that makes sense. Maybe it's because there's a sense of novelty to it, From combining whale song with new age musical concepts, essentially. It's like experimentalism without a very direct purpose, I feel, like how it comes across on this album. Without really discovering weird and unusual interactions with the sound, but rather forcefully trying to create harmonious vibes between the abundance of different layers, mostly between the flute and the whales. And the water itself as well, I guess. And there's a niceness to it, and maybe it's that niceness almost, the intent to just create something experimental that does confuse you, that I find a bit amusing. To be fair, all the experimental music we look at on the show is so weird and out there for the most part, at least a lot of it is. And then to have something that's experimental of sorts, but not in a very sort of like outlandish way, is a bit weird to me, which is very odd, because it's not that weird at all, I guess. To be fair, I do think there's something a bit silly and garish about this, though. But regardless of me feeling that, I can't deny that this album does work in doing what it wants out to do. At its core, it's just an incredibly pleasant album experience that just pulls you into a state of relaxation, letting you float along the water and just enjoy yourself, enjoy the nice vibes. So, there is another track on this album, though, and that is the B-side. We get the additional composition of Mystical Deep, which is a slightly longer composition, clocking in at just over 23 minutes. And I'll say, it does feel like side 2 does a lot more, whereas the first song seems like it was very much dominated by the flute, it feels like side 2 is perhaps a lot more dominated by the more naturalistic sounds of the whales or even other aquatic creatures and just the nature of it all, if that makes sense. And in fairness, this makes track 2 a much more unusual listening experience. It feels a bit more experimental at times, actually diving into those what I would call field recordings aspect, creating, which, it creates some rather unusual sounds as a result, many of which interact with each other in very unusual ways, But beyond that, it's just most of the same, to be fair. Birdsong, waves, aquatic creatures, drones, cymbals, and of course the flutes. But I do like how this one creates much more emphasis on the field recording aspect, because you get so many funnier moments, especially when the sea life, the aquatic life out there, just creates these really unusual and bizarre vocalizations. Like there's one part you just get this weird sort of whoop sound, and other ones you get sort of like strange garbled squeals of the animals, and there's something very amusing about it, but I don't know if that's intentional. I don't think it is. It's just the natural sound, but there's something a little bit funny about that. And I have to, is it my favourite of the two sides then as a result? I think so, but do I like that for the wrong reasons? Probably, let's be honest. I think, as well, just to try make another point, music like this can and maybe be classified as muzak or elevator music. I think there's a bunch of different terms for this, and I hope some of you out there understand what I'm talking about, But essentially, the way I envisioned it is it's kind of the opposite of Brian Eno's agenda for ambient music, As Brian Eno felt ambient music should be as listenable as it is ignorable. And sometimes I feel when it comes to new age music, and I might be wrong, I probably am wrong, mostly just an opinion I guess, but I feel like when it comes to new age music, it essentially leans way more towards the ignorable side of things. That's not to say that there's not new age albums that do, grab your attention and hold on to it. An example would probably be, New Blue Moon, I think it was called, by Andre 3000, of course, which was a wonderful new age album of flute music, of course, wasn't it? In any case, though, when it comes to this, though, when it comes to Reverence and stuff like that, this kind of listening experience is one that I feel is meant to accompany a state of mind or a relaxing location, and arguably is not meant to be listened to intently. But that doesn't mean it isn't good in its own right, though. Like mentioned, there is that relaxing feeling that effortlessly comes across on this album, and it does have that power to gently calm you down and sort of bring you back to the ground if it's something you find you need. And of course, as funny as I find it, there is something lovely and rather quaint about the combination of Oldfield's exquisite flute performances and the randomness of Whale's song, to be fair, as well as the twinkling, droning ambience that comes up from time to time. There's something rather nice about it all at the very core of it. Still, it's a little bit tricky for me to dive into the meat of this album, as I don't think there's much meat to it at all. Which is maybe a cruel sentiment, but it's just how I feel, of course. The whole point of the show is just discussing the feelings and emotions we get from listening to different kinds of albums and things, and this is just a funny story I thought we would have. I have to say, though, speaking of funny, the amusing sounds that intimately happen on the album's second half are very amusing to me. It really just tickles me. But I do think it's a little bit cruel to point out, because I don't think it was Oldfield's intention at all. It was just an unintended side effect of the very result of combining these various sound sources together. I do wonder, though, did he intentionally set out the album to sound like this, though, where you have side one's emphasis on flutes and drones, and then you contrast that with an emphasis on the more naturalistic sounds on the second half? Maybe? I don't know, maybe that's giving Oldfield too much credit, but it'd be cool if he did think of that, because I think there's something very interesting about that, about contrasting the two paths together, basically, on this very cassette release. Especially with it being a cassette release, A and B side, kind of like that. I just think there's something cool about stuff like that. I don't know if it's intentional, of course, but it's a little bit of a parallel I hear and see when listening to this album. That's kind of interesting to me. But still, I can't get out of my head the sort of pointlessness of it all, which is, the functionality of it existing as music that's not really meant to be intently listened to, but just felt in a weird way, I guess, but just not, really listened to, because it's not designed to do that. It's just there to calm you down, which is still fine, of course. It's still a grand thing to do. And so I think with that, we should probably come to the end of our episode of Weird Music there. Kind of glad to have talked about this one. I think I've been a little bit mean to this one, but I just think there's something odd, bizarre, funny about it, but also it is kind of cool as well, Just to go back to sort of new age music as a concept, it's inherently quite weird to me for some reason, and I don't know why, but some aspects of the new age music scene remind me a lot of the kinds of things you hear in the vaporwave scene, But I think that's a rabbit hole to dive into another day. Put a pin in that book, because I don't think we're going to address that today. In any case, glad to have talked about new age music on the show, because there's actually a bunch I want to talk about, which I think would be kind of interesting and funny. Hopefully, I've explained why I think it's, amusing and funny. I don't know. Maybe I've just been an asshole this episode, but it's weird music. Every episode's rather different, isn't it? In any case, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Weird Music. If you know of any other weird new age music albums we should be covering on the channel, let me know in the comments. I'll add it to the randomizer. For now, I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Reverence.